Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This video has been a long time coming. It's a subject near and dear to my heart because I love weirdness. I love the strange. I love the arbitrary. In short, I like the supernatural. Those spooky things that make you glad it was just a book, show, or movie. The things that can give you nightmares. Those shows and books that leave you wild with speculation. How did that work? Why does that work? What is that thing? This isn't a video discussing the unusual, those things that are a little bit off but can fit into the normal everyday. The problem is, so much media is being steered towards or absolutely made to fit the mundane, often taking the extraordinary and weird and cramming it into a high school or a love story or any other normal or demi-normal situation you can imagine. So let's get started with defining the supernatural. Then we'll move on to examples of stories that have killed their supernatural feel. Then we'll discuss what makes the supernatural feel supernatural. And then we'll move on to what kills it. And this is a loose list, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Because first, we have an ad from this video's sponsor, me. My next book, Battle Games Book 2, comes out this Saturday, July the 20th. I've dropped the price of book 1 to 99 cents, and I even have an audiobook for the first book. I'm still working on the audiobook for the second. If you would like to critique my work, as I have for so many others, I will leave a link in the description. Reading the critiques and reviews of other people is how I improve as a writer. Now, back to the supernatural. I'm going to do my best to explain a very difficult thing. A lot of what I have to discuss here is grasping at the ephemeral. So I'm going to do the best I can. Also, please forgive me because this video is going to be a little bit rushed. I'm behind on about 100 different things, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure this video is out on time. So first we need to establish terms. What do I mean when I say supernatural? This is an important definition as there are lots of shows, books, comics, and movies that have unnatural themes, characters, and setting that aren't supernatural. The definition we're going with is something unexplainable by science or known natural law. Or to say it another way, something that behaves in a way alien to understood possibilities. This doesn't mean we can't know some of the rules or how it works, more that it feels unfamiliar and slightly off. There's an aura of mystery. It's a story, aspect, character, or place that feels mysterious and otherworldly. This means that the unknown should be the largest aspect of a supernatural object. In truth, the supernatural should feel like it works off of dream logic, and that includes nightmares. What we're not talking about is superpowers, magic that's explainable like science, aliens from outer space. That last one can be mysterious, but not in the way we're discussing. There is a quote I love that I've been unable to find for years, and it goes, "Horror isn't the unknown, it's the distortion of the familiar." To cultivate a proper supernatural atmosphere, you need a bit of the familiar and something completely out of place. It's like living in Alaska and walking outside one morning to see a flamboyance of flamingos picking away at the snow-covered ground. You should also feel like you're not safe, as if there are rules you're not aware of, and possibly beyond your understanding. I could prattle on, but it's probably best to get into some examples. Let's start with one I've recently read, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Yes, I know, I was making a mistake thinking a romantasy book could properly establish a supernatural atmosphere. But it threatened to. It was slight, but it was there. Fairies are one of those mythological creatures we've really done a disservice to. Modern storytelling, Disney being the biggest offender, have made us think of fairies as cute little people. That they're merry little pranksters that like a bit of a joke and a bit of wine, like some kind of homeless frat bro. While mythology does have benign fairies, the rest are not harmless pranksters. They are at best ignorant troublemakers and at worst malicious monsters. Fairies are a special kind of cruel, that kind you find in a child. When ACOTAR starts, there's a reasonable attempt made to make the Fae feel like a threat. They're changelings, they follow weird rules and do abhorrent things. They can't lie, but they will do their best to trick you. They laugh at suffering. Then we finally meet one. When Tamlin shows up, if I remember correctly, he's in the form of a giant wolf with deer antlers. He wants retribution due to an ancient treaty. The payment is a person who can never return to their family. All of this feels very Fae. Some great, threatening, otherworldly beast demanding retribution and tribute for something a normal person would have done. Tamlin then takes Feyre, the main character, away from her family to a realm her family can't reach. We're even informed before this that the fairies have weird weaknesses like iron, ashwood, and possibly the runes carved over Feyre's front door. That the fairies can't lie, but they can withhold information. We don't know why these rules are outside the lore the book is based on, but we do know that these are rules. The first of these we find out is a lie, is the ruins. Alright, that one was fine. The book established they probably wouldn't work. It would have made the book better if they had. The family had this big monster outside the house and no one could leave until they sacrificed one of their own. But that didn't happen. And that's fine. Next we find out that the Fae can lie. That the Fae just spread a rumor that they couldn't. This is after Feyre, the main character, went to pains to catching a certain fairy to learn the truth. All of what she learned is now brought into question. Then we learn that iron doesn't hurt them. The only thing that can kill them is ashwood. Sadly, the fairies have torn up all the ash trees, so they're basically invincible at this point. Except to each other, because why should the love interest have any weakness whatsoever? Suddenly, the fairies are just dudes with superpowers and an allergy to an extinct wood. All suspense has gone out the window, and our main character has been demoted to victim, completely at the mercy of her captor. But I've tread that ground before. When we started the story, the fairies felt like a force of nature. They could be disembodied voices, or beings that only exist if you acknowledge them. They were a weird threat that wasn't easily handled. By the end of the story, they're just people with powers. The Fae are just a special ruling elite that by the end of the book make the main character one of their own. There are a few things later on that try to re-establish the weirdness, one being the Queen of Fairies has a ring made from a human eye. She somehow subverted the love interest's powers, her bargain with him somehow keeps him in check, but at this point, it's too late. The weirdness and discomfort from the beginning of the book is gone. Now it's just elites with powers struggling to take power from each other. I'm not going to lose sleep over a random romantasy book that failed at being as odd as it could have been, so let's talk about something a little closer to my heart. I used to love the show Supernatural. I loved the monster of the week vibe it started with, the mystery around where their father was and what he was doing, and that whole thing with the Demon Blood kids. The show was dark, weird, and mysterious. Fast forward about 9 seasons. Sam and Dean have both died multiple times and been brought back. They've defeated heaven, hell, and the invincible monsters God locked away in purgatory. Hell has had so many regime changes, I started to confuse them with an oil-bearing country in the Middle East that tried to move off the US dollar. And heaven turns out to be just a bureaucratic state with an oppressive streak. The reason I chose this exact point for my reference and stopped there is because I stopped watching the show shortly after they killed the head Leviathan. I know the show continued on, but honestly the show should have stopped after Michael and Lucifer were trapped in Lucifer's old cell. It was a good ending, all the loose ends were tied up, and we could all move on. Well, most of the loose ends were tied up. The mysteries had been explained, and there was no need to retread old ground. The show is still going on almost a decade later. I think they're on season 16 at this point. I've caught a few episodes here and there, but the show is a shadow of what it once was. If they carry the show for another 7 years, they'll actually threaten to beat Kelsey Grammer's record for an actor playing the same character, that being 22 years. The show has stopped the end of the world 10 seasons ago. If I remember correctly, every question the show started with has been answered long, long ago. Sam and Dean have died so many times, all the threat of death is gone. The idea of normal people fighting some creepy monster that's plaguing a small town or family is gone. Each episode was like a little horror movie. Now it's just another show on the CW. The angels, the demons, the monsters, they're all just dudes. This is just some power struggle between random people with superpowers. I'm starting to notice a theme here. So let's move on to the big one. The one that may catch me some flack, but it's one that I actually care about. I'm pretty sure at this point anyone watching this channel has seen Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel The Legend of Korra. I, like many people, loved Avatar: The Last Airbender. The spirit world was a big part of the story. Here was this world parallel to our own that followed nightmare rules. Here there were beings beyond our comprehension. Beings like Ko the Face Stealer. He's like something right out of a child's nightmare. He feels ancient, horrible, and completely without human mercy. He has weird and deadly rules when dealing with him. He feels more like a force of nature than a sentient being. The spirit world itself is an uncomfortable place. It was a dangerous place. And going there was actually a dangerous thing. The scariest, and arbitrarily best part, was that it was mostly unknown. The Avatar was the bridge to this world that, while completely vital to our own, felt so hostile to it. Then we get to Korra. I want to get this out of the way. I don't hate The Legend of Korra. Mostly. This was a good chance to have a grittier story, something with a bit more nuance. Then the explanations started pouring in. At one point, Korra meets Iroh in the spirit world. Here, it is explained that the spirit world resounds to her emotions and state of mind. This was a major blow. This turns the spirit world from this dark primal place to lucid dreaming. The only threat present now are those you bring with you. This is a terrible shift. The spirit world in Avatar: The Last Airbender represents the unknown and unknowable. It is an incredibly hostile place that doesn't care about you. It was dark and dangerous. Now we find out that it's only like that because everyone else who entered did so with the wrong state of mind. This, however, wasn't the punch that knocked out the story. That came in the anti-Avatar storyline. First of all, the idea that at one time the human and spirit worlds were the same place can be a cool idea if you don't try to explain why they're not anymore. We find out that the spirit's behavior and alignment is affected by two much bigger spirits. One is good, the other is bad, and all spirits change based upon who's stronger. This eliminates the agency the spirits had. It also flies in the face of the old lore. Will Ko the Face Stealer start dispensing ice cream because the Avatar goes into the spirit world extra nice, and the spirit of ultimate good has an edge today? The attempt to explain the unexplained basically killed the threatening feel of the spirit world. Now it's not even populated with people with special powers and the occasional want to prank humans with disfiguration. It's full of scripted automatons that will flip from one set of behaviors to the other based on whether the good spirit or the bad spirit is winning. There's also the problem that bending in the show was reduced to science. Yes, this could work by the logic of the world, but that's not what the world was about. Bending was a known quantity. The waterbenders were dependent on the moon spirit to bend. The firebenders were dependent on the sun. Bending had a strong spiritual link. Then the show just goes, nope, giant robot time. I would say it feels very 40k to have a giant robot powered by the in-world magic, but it was a ridiculous tone shift and really hurt the story and the supernatural elements of it. So how do we keep the supernatural supernatural? Again, I remind you, this whole video is based on my tastes. First of all, the supernatural should be mysterious. Most things about it should be unknown and up to speculation. The reader, the watcher, or player should know all the rules. For a mysterious place like the Feywilds or the Spirit World, you should question if things are even alive. or if it's just something that exists in this place. You want it to feel dangerous and a little confusing. There's a review in my backlog of a book I believe was called Annihilation that does a fantastic job of this. I don't think I was very impressed with the rest of the book, but it did a fantastic job on atmosphere. The weirdness of the tower they were exploring, the oddness of the place they had been sent, the weird rules they had to follow. You question almost everything throughout the book. It kind of feels like a fever dream. So little is explained in the first book. This also might have changed because I didn't continue on with the series. Mystery and the supernatural do not stand up to explanation well. A theme I remember from the 90s and early 2000s was the over-explaining of every mystery. We had to apply science to the unknown, that everything had to be explainable. Granted, there is some cool stuff you can do with this theme, but this concept has killed the supernatural. A supernatural creature should be one that acts outside the norm. It should feel either really far from human or really close, but there's something terribly wrong. You should never feel safe around it, and if you do, you should be punished for feeling safe around it. They are not human, and when you get too comfortable is when you need to be reminded of it most. Otherwise, they're just dudes. Nothing kills a mysterious race of beings more than reducing them to people who look funny and have powers. The death of mystery is familiarity. This probably bumps against most romance books. Romance is a very formulaic genre. The supernatural should be like the weird kid playing in the woods eating bugs and bringing home odd creatures. The two aren't exactly enemies, as much as they're living in two completely different houses. It's not that you can't mix the two, but... Let me make a comparison. It's probably the most offensive comparison I've ever made, but I'll let you decide who gets off the worst. A Court of Thorns and Roses, and most supernatural romance for that matter, are just Monster Musume for women. I'm not kidding, and I'll show you why. Let's look at Monster Musume. It's an ecchi anime that's popular in internet circles, and I don't need to tell you why. The story. A random every guy is forced to live with a harem of attractive women with monster parts that don't take away from their human appeal, and the monster parts neither prevent coupling nor the possibility of children. All the women universally want the protagonist and frequently throw themselves at him. Now let's look at ACOTAR. A random every woman is abducted from her home and forced to live with hunky love interest A with monster powers. The powers don't take away from his human appeal and don't prevent coupling or the possibility of children. More men are thrown at the protagonist later, and all the men in the universe conspire to have the main character and scheme to make that happen. Not convinced? Here's a few more. Monster Musume. The beings in this world, if played straight, would be terrifying and dangerous, but the harm they cause is played up for laughs and cheap perversion. All injuries and damage is dealt with quickly, rarely acknowledged, and has little to no impact on the story. ACOTAR. The beings in this world, if played straight, would be terrifying and dangerous. Any injury or damage is dealt with quickly, acknowledged in passing, and then ignored when convenient. It has little to no impact on the story. Alright, one last comparison, I promise. Monster Musume. All problems that arise are quickly resolved, and it's not the reason people are watching anyway. ACOTAR. All problems that arise are resolved quickly and serve little to no purpose, and it's not the reason people are reading anyway. There are a few differences. Monster Musume doesn't pretend it's something more serious. It knows who its audience is and gives them what they want. ACOTAR, as far as I've read, feels like it wants to be some epic story. Really, it's just a harem story for women without the jokes and none of the monster parts. Now, I'm going to stop right here and let you guys know I am not asking my audience to send me books with women getting romanced by monsters. I don't want to read them and I don't want to see them. Humans are not inherently mysterious. The mystery with humans comes from what we do. With the supernatural, it comes from what the supernatural is. Unless the supernatural happens to be a place, and then it's how different is it from Earth. If your monster is just the billionaire who lives down the street, that's not mysterious. If spirits have understandable human goals, they become Bob from across the street. If the Feywild is just another place with all the same natural rules, it just becomes another town. The supernatural is mysterious by nature, and mystery comes from the unknown. My last major point is that mystery dies with time. If you're putting the mysterious in your work, you're on a clock. The more page presence your supernatural element has, the less supernatural it will feel. There are some books and movies that got the mystery right and weren't going for the supernatural. Jaws made people the world over terrified of shark. The shark in the movie actually has very little screen time. The movie Alien was so effective because of how weird, dangerous, and unpredictable the alien was. This impact was lost in later movies. Any series that runs long enough will inevitably run out of mystery, as familiarity is the death of mystery. So what can we take from all this? First of all, take this for what it's worth, my opinion. I believe others may share it, but we're talking about the unknown, which incidentally is when the supernatural is at its best, when it's unknown. Don't reduce your supernaturals to people. Humans aren't mysterious by nature. This goes for humans masquerading as fae, werewolves, vampires, ghosts, and any other monster that's just a guy with a few weird parts and powers. Over-explaining kills mystery. For something to be truly weird or creepy, we shouldn't know everything. That the rules for the supernatural should be kind of dubious, at least for the reader. The supernatural should be dangerous, and that the supernatural should be just that, beyond the natural. Good luck, everyone.